I got the text in the green room, 5 minutes before stepping on stage. I'd been playing guitar for 30 years, but my hands still shook before every show, not out of fear, but out of reverence. That night, it was a small club in Austin, the kind of place with sticky floors and a crowd that knew their lyrics. I lived for rooms like that. The text said, "I think we're done, Evan. I can't do this anymore." That was it. No salutation. No punctuation. Just the end of my marriage in a sentence that didn't even bother to say my name. I stared at it while the stage manager tapped my shoulder and said, "You're up." So I went up, plugged in, adjusted my strap, ran a hand through my hair while the crowd whistled, and called out requests I'd already planned to play. "Good to be back in Texas," I said, voice even, smile easy. "Let's make some noise." And I played. For 2 hours, I let muscle memory carry me. The strings didn't care that my marriage had just died backstage. The audience didn't know. I cracked jokes between songs. I dedicated Love Like Whiskey to a couple in the front row celebrating their anniversary. I told stories about bar fights and busted amps. I kept it light, charming. But somewhere around the third encore, something shifted. I was playing When the River Leaves, a song I wrote years ago for her, for Mara. The chords came slow and low, and my voice caught on the second verse. No one noticed. I just let the mic drift while I played the rest of the song like an instrumental. Told them it was a stripped-down version. They bought it. After the show, I shook hands, signed merch, took pictures. A woman asked if I was married, and I said, "Not sure anymore." She laughed. I didn't. Back in the dressing room, I sat alone with a bottle of water and read the message again. "I think we're done." No fight. No tears. Just an exit wound. I didn't reply. Didn't call. Didn't panic. I just stared at the floor until the crew packed up the last cable and said, "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "All good." I checked into a motel off the interstate with paper-thin walls and a flickering porch light. I took a shower and stared at my reflection in the mirror, water dripping down a face I barely recognized. 46 years old. Calluses on every fingertip. A crow's foot beside each eye. I looked tired. Not from the show, but from something deeper. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just laid on the bed fully clothed, guitar case beside me, and tried to remember the last time Mara had looked at me like she used to. Like I was firelight. It had been a while. Our marriage wasn't loud. No shattered plates. No screaming matches in the kitchen. It was slow erosion, like water slipping under a foundation until the whole thing sinks. She stopped coming to shows a year ago. Said the road was exhausting. Said she missed stability. She started working late. Started traveling with colleagues I never met. I knew. In the gut of me, I knew. But I didn't ask. I just played through it. That's the thing about musicians. We're good at pretending it's all part of the act. We sing our pain, so no one asks where it's coming from. I spent the night staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it wobble and squeak. Around 3 a.m., I wrote her back. Just 3 words. Understood. Take care. I didn't sign my name either. The next morning, I loaded my gear into the van and drove north toward Nashville. No music, no radio, just the sound of the road under my tires. My phone buzzed a few times. Manager asking for receipts. Mara's name lighting up the screen. Once, twice, then not again. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled over at a truck stop, sat at a plastic booth with a styrofoam coffee, and opened my laptop. Bank account, emptied. Joint savings, zeroed out. She'd been planning it. I didn't react. Just logged out, closed the laptop, and watched a couple argue over pancakes at the table next to mine. I didn't know what to feel. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was more like static. Like someone had turned the volume down on the world. I sipped the bitter coffee, stared out at the endless asphalt, and whispered to no one. This is how it starts. I didn't go home. The house Mara and I had shared for 11 years was in East Nashville. White siding, front porch with a swing we never used. I could have driven there. Could have stood in the driveway like some wandering ghost. But I didn't. Instead, I rented a short-term studio above a bait shop near Old Hickory Lake. Cash, no questions. The landlord was a Vietnam vet who gave me a discount after I told him I was a musician. My son tried to make it in L.A., he said. Got eaten alive. I just nodded. Didn't tell him I'd already been chewed up and spit out by bigger cities. The studio was bare bones, single bed, mini fridge, a flickering lamp. But it had a lock, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. In the morning, I went quiet. stopped answering calls from my manager, stopped replying to texts from bandmates. They knew something was up. You can't play with a guy for 20 years and not feel the shift in the way he carries himself. I told them I needed time, that I was working on a solo record, which wasn't entirely a lie. I spent my days walking the shoreline, guitar slung across my back like a weapon. I played into the wind. No audience. No applause. Just the slow recalibration of a man trying to find his footing. And I planned. Not revenge. Not yet. But I started pulling at threads. First, I checked the titles on our assets. The house was in both our names, but the studio space we'd bought 3 years ago, the one where I recorded Hollow Mercy, was under mine alone. A small blessing. I changed the locks the next day. Then came the bank accounts. Joint ones were empty, of course. But the royalty accounts from my back catalog? She'd never touched those. Probably forgot they existed. Most people don't realize songwriters get paid in trickles, a few bucks here, a couple hundred there when a track gets licensed in Europe. I hadn't checked them in months, but when I did, they were still alive. Still bleeding out pennies that were mine alone. I moved the funds to a new account under a different name. Quietly. No paper trail that would raise alarms. Next came the backup hard drives. My entire life was on those. Demos, lyrics, voice memos, tour logs, studio notes. I packed them into a padded case and took them to a safety deposit box across town. The woman at the counter asked what I was storing. Old memories, I said. She smiled. You'd be surprised how many people say that. On the third night in the lake house, I opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. Our prenup. Mara hadn't wanted one at first. Said it felt unromantic. Said it made her feel like I didn't trust her. But back then, I'd just signed with a label, just sold a song to a major artist, and my lawyer insisted. Reluctantly, she agreed. I read it now like I was reading a suicide note. It was tight. Clean. Split assets by contribution. Earnings stay separate unless commingled. I'd been smart. Or maybe just lucky. Still, there were loopholes. Things I hadn't foreseen. Emotional clauses. Language about intent to remain in partnership and fair settlement if trust was broken. I highlighted every line. Sent a copy to a lawyer I'd worked with during my first publishing deal. Told him I might need him soon. He replied in 5 minutes. I've been waiting for this. I didn't know what he meant by that. Maybe Mara had already called him. Maybe he just saw the same things I had, long before I was ready to admit them. Either way, I knew the clock had started ticking. I backed up everything. Contracts, messages, receipts. I started a private folder labeled December. It was the last month I remembered feeling happy in our marriage. It held photos, ticket stubs, a video of us dancing in the kitchen to Otis Redding. I didn't know why I kept it. Maybe to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. That once, for a little while, we'd been real. Then I dug into the digital trail. Her Instagram was private now. Used to be public. Used to be full of photos of us on the road, of handwritten lyrics and backstage passes. Now it was curated, airbrushed, clean. I noticed something strange. A man's voice in the background of her stories. Never seen, always there. Laughing, talking. Once, calling her babe. I took screen recordings. Stored them in a file labeled audio evidence. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. But I was starting to build the scaffolding. Not for a fight, for a reckoning. It's funny how quickly you learn to live in silence. How easily you fall into routine when your whole life is burned down. Mornings were coffee and emails. Afternoons were walks and paperwork. Evenings, I played until my fingers bled, wrote lyrics I wasn't sure I'd ever record. Lines like, "You left me like a chorus / too familiar to be missed." I knew something was coming. I could feel it in my bones, the way animals sense a storm long before the sky darkens. The calm wasn't peace. It was the breath before the plunge. And somewhere out there, Mara was pretending nothing had happened. Living in our house. Sleeping in our bed. But I wasn't coming home. Not yet. I had things to do first. The first real sign was the mail. A stray letter addressed to Mara, forwarded to the P.O. box I'd set up while I was staying at the lake place. She must have forgotten about the autoforward on our shared magazine subscriptions. A small, glossy envelope with her name printed above our old address. No return name, just the mark of a private financial institution. When I opened it, it wasn't a bank statement. It was a pre-approval, luxury credit line. The kind that doesn't just get handed out unless someone's recently moved a lot of money or presented themselves as someone new. She'd listed herself as self-employed, business owner, marketing, and events. That was news to me. I started tracing it. Every late night she used to chalk up to work, every trip to visit her sister. Every time she told me she had a meeting downtown at some co-working space. I thought it was boredom, maybe a phase. What it really was, I didn't know yet. But I could feel it now, rising in me like smoke from a fuse I hadn't known was burning. She had a life I wasn't part of, and it wasn't just emotional distance anymore. It was something else, something constructed, maintained, manufactured. I called Daryl, our old drummer. He'd left the band a year ago when his second kid was born, but he was still close to Mara. She always liked him, said he was the stable one. I hadn't talked to him since the split. "Hey," he said when he answered, a little too carefully. "Hey man, got a minute?" Yeah, what's up?" There was a pause on the other end. That kind of silence that makes your stomach tighten before your brain knows why. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked. He sighed. "I didn't know everything. But you knew something. She was different, man. The last few shows she came to, she'd show up late, leave early. She stopped wearing the ring." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Did she say anything?" "Only once. At that bar in Tulsa last spring. She was drunk. Said she was tired of being in someone else's rear view." The words hit harder than I expected. Rear view. Like I was the one who moved on. Like I was the one who made her disappear. "She's seeing someone?" I asked. Another pause. "Longer." "I think so," Daryl said. "Name's Chase. I met him once. He booked a private show at some gallery downtown last summer. Art crowd. Mara was handling logistics. She introduced him like he was just another client. But, yeah, she looked at him the way she used to look at you. That was it. That was the moment something shifted inside me. All the little changes started to make sense. The new perfume I smelled on her coat last Christmas. The second glass of wine left untouched when I came home early from a run of shows. The way she'd suddenly started dressing up just to go out for coffee. I hung up and sat in silence for over an hour, watching dust hang in the sunlight coming through the window like ash suspended in honey. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I started reading through her posts, old captions, old comments. People she'd tagged, places she'd geotagged. Chase. No last name, just a username. Chaser77. Private profile, but his bio listed a design studio. I Googled it. New company, sleek website, list of clients that seemed like they'd been copy-pasted from startup pitch decks. And there, tucked into the corner of a photo from a holiday party last year, Mara, smiling, leaning into him, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Suddenly, the silences of the past year weren't just silences. They were cover-ups. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't arrive as a gunshot. It comes as a slow leak. Little things that don't add up until your whole life feels like it's been written in someone else's handwriting. I started collecting screenshots, invoices, email headers from shared accounts she didn't know I still had access to. I wasn't sure what I was building. Not yet, but I knew the shape of it. It felt like a case file. Some nights I wrote music. Not love songs anymore. Songs that sounded like warnings. Like headlights in fog. Like broken glass under boots. I wrote one called The Disappearing Act. It had a line I couldn't stop repeating. "You ghosted me while staring straight into my eyes." One morning, I woke up to find my photo albums had been wiped from our shared cloud. Just gone. Pictures of tours, of anniversaries, of the road trip we took to Big Sur, where she told me she'd never felt more alive. All of it erased. Like I'd been cut out of the timeline. That's when I knew she was preparing for something. And so was I. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was awake. Alert. Like a man who's been lost in a cave and finally sees daylight. The love I'd once wrapped my whole world around. It wasn't just gone. It had been traded. For what, I didn't know. But I intended to find out. And this time, I wasn't going to write a song about it. I was going to burn the truth into stone. The letter came in a white envelope, dropped at my P.O. box like it was just another bill. Inside, a packet of documents, cleanly printed, neatly bound. Petition for dissolution of marriage. No note. No call. Just ink and legal language. 14 years together reduced to a filing code in black serif font. Filed by Mara Keene. Filed with. Petitioner requests full ownership of marital residence and spousal support. The breath went out of me like I'd been sucker punched. I sat in the front seat of my van, sunlight bleeding through the windshield, and flipped through page after page of cold bureaucracy. She was claiming she'd supported my career, that my income was inconsistent, that she had stabilized the household, that she had sacrificed her professional opportunities for my touring. That last one almost made me laugh. Mara hated the road, hated the sound checks and the sleepless nights, the long drives and shitty motels. She'd made that clear by year 3, and now she was weaponizing it. There was more. Buried in the attachments, a new deed to the house. Transferred 6 weeks ago. My name was gone. I remembered the refinancing conversation we'd had around Christmas. She'd told me she was taking care of the mortgage paperwork. Said she needed me to sign a permission slip so she could deal with the bank. I hadn't looked closely. I was mid-tour, half asleep, trusting her like a fool. Turns out, that signature? Not mine. It was close. Almost perfect. But I don't loop my capital ES like that. And I always press hard on the downstrokes. The real signature scars the page. This was cleaner. Rehearsed. Forged. I set the documents down on the passenger seat, staring at nothing. At the dashboard. At my own hands. Calloused. Veined. Still trembling. Then I screamed. First time in months I'd let it out. Not words, just raw sound. Fury stripped of form. Something ancient and feral. I punched the steering wheel hard enough to bruise my knuckles. Slammed the horn and kept my fist there, the noise wailing across the empty parking lot like a war cry. Then I went cold. Focused. I took the packet to my lawyer the next morning. Aaron Hart. Worn leather briefcase, gray beard, voice like gravel. Old school guy. Been through his own divorce 15 years ago. He read everything silently, occasionally shaking his head. This isn't just betrayal, he said finally. It's premeditated theft. She forged my signature, I said flatly. Looks that way. And she didn't just take your name off the house. She opened a line of credit against it. Used the equity. My jaw clenched. For what? Aaron slid a printout across the table. A ledger of transactions. Designer furniture. Luxury art rentals. Travel expenses. One was a wire transfer labeled. Consultation, CK Creative Management. Chase Keane. I asked, already knowing the answer. Aaron nodded. The guy you flagged from the gallery. He's listed as a partner on several of Mara's new business ventures. LLCs formed within the last 9 months. All of them use the house as the registered business address. She didn't just leave me. She replaced me. Legally, financially, creatively. With him. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. I was pacing the edge of Aaron's office, breathing like a man, trying not to throw a chair through the window. She built this whole thing under my nose. She thought you wouldn't see it, Aaron said. That you'd be too broken to fight. I stopped pacing, turned toward him. She was wrong. The next week was a bloodletting. We filed a motion to freeze assets. I went to the police with a copy of the forged signature. Filed a report for fraud. I sent Chase a cease and desist for unauthorized use of my name and likeness. He'd apparently used me in a pitch deck as collaborator on music initiatives. They pulled it down fast. I went back to the studio, my studio, and found it stripped. Her things gone. Half the vinyl collection missing. The Polaroids we'd hung along the ceiling beam, cut down. Only thing she left behind was the red ceramic ashtray I made for her when we were broke and living above a dive bar in Memphis. She'd always said it was her favorite thing I ever gave her. Now it sat alone on the windowsill, filled with lipstick-stained butts and ashes that weren't mine. I threw it against the wall. It didn't shatter. Just cracked, clean down the middle. On the radio that night, they played one of my old songs. Red Thread. A love song I wrote in 2014 when Mara and I first moved in together. The one with the lyric. Even if we come undone, the thread still pulls me home. I pulled over. Turned the radio off. Silence again. That was the last time I'd ever play that song live. The first time I saw Chase Keane in person, he didn't see me. He was laughing on the sidewalk outside a boutique hotel in the Gulch, wearing a blazer too tight in the shoulders and sunglasses that probably cost more than my first guitar. Mara stood beside him, holding a to-go latte, smiling at something he said. She looked new, or maybe just curated. Her laugh was softer than I remembered, more polished, less real. I didn't confront them. I just watched from the window of my rented Jeep, engine idling, mind sharp as broken glass. I wasn't here to be the ex-husband who loses his mind outside a coffee shop. I was here to hunt. Back at the lake house, I made a list. Names, dates, transactions. I started laying everything out like a set list for war. What I knew, what I suspected, and what I still had to find. I started with the LLC filings. Mara had registered 2 companies in the past year. Both used our marital address, the one she stole out from under me. One was a lifestyle branding consultancy. The other, a shell company with no website and no client history. Just a name, Kingdom Creative Group. Sounded impressive. Meant nothing. I dug deeper. The business license used a virtual mail service, not a real office. The EIN numbers traced back to a cluster of similar businesses filed over the last 2 years. Different names, but always the same agent, Jasper and Lynn Legal Services. I looked them up. Turns out, they weren't a real law firm. Just a paperwork mill out of Florida, specializing in corporate anonymity. Set up your LLC in minutes. Keep your name off the record. Useful if you're trying to hide something. Or someone. I brought it all to Aaron. He whistled low and said, "Looks like you married a strategist." She always said she hated paperwork, I muttered. People say a lot of things when they're lying. Aaron called in a contact from financial forensics, a woman named Marla who used to work with the IRS. She had the dry voice of someone who'd seen the worst of people's secrets and no longer got surprised by them. It took her 4 days. At the end of it, she had a 3-ring binder and a tired smile. "She's clever," Marla said. "But she's not a criminal." "Not exactly. Just a collaborator." "Collaborator?" She turned the binder to show me a web of names and transfers. Mara's tied to Chase through business. But Chase is tied to 2 other entities, one of which has been flagged for audit twice in the last year. The entity was called Lyric Drift Collective, a supposed music consulting firm. On paper, they helped artists get licensing deals and festival bookings. In practice, they laundered ghost writing credits and skimmed from back-end royalties. Chase had ties to 6 songwriters, one of whom was suing a record label for missing payments. "You're telling me this goes beyond me?" Marla nodded. "You were the opening act. Just the easiest one to knock off the bill." I felt sick. So that was it. It wasn't just that she left me. It wasn't just the affair or the house or the forged documents. I'd been targeted, picked clean, because I was a working musician with catalog rights, still getting slow, steady royalties. Because I had a reputation that could be borrowed, fronted as credibility. Because I trusted her. Aaron leaned back in his chair. This wasn't love gone bad. This was a long con. I stood up, walked to the window, watched birds skip across the water in the distance. "What can we do?" I asked. "We build a case. Fraud. Conspiracy. Maybe even racketeering if we can tie it all together. But we need time. Paperwork. Proof. You'll have it." That night, I called in every favor I'd ever earned. Old bandmates. Engineers. Bar owners. Even a tour manager who once ran background checks for fun. Everyone had a story about Chase. A near deal that didn't pan out. A percentage that disappeared. A collaborator whose name got erased from the liner notes just before release. I took notes. I recorded every call. Then I messaged Mara. Just one line. "Tell Chase I know." She didn't respond. But an hour later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. "Evan. Hey, this is Chase. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'd really like to talk. Man to man. Just a conversation." I saved the message to 3 different places. That week, I filed an official complaint with the State Business Board, attached all the evidence. Filed another with the Royalty Collection Agency regarding forged partnerships and impersonation. I wasn't trying to just ruin their scheme. I wanted to cut the brake lines before the next curve. By Friday, the paperwork was moving. Aaron called me that night, voice tight with something close to satisfaction. "Depositions are coming. They'll know we're serious now." They picked the wrong man to leave behind. He chuckled. Damn right they did. I hung up and opened a fresh page in my notebook. I wrote a single line at the top. "This ends with fire." The first domino fell with a letter. Not from me. From my lawyer, Aaron, printed on thick stock, full of legal weight. A demand for full financial disclosure from Mara and Chase's enterprises. Subpoena to follow. She responded through counsel, of course. Cold. Deflective. But I knew she felt it. The pressure. The beginning of collapse. I didn't stop there. I sent a carefully written statement, along with documentation, to every royalty body I'd ever been paid through. Pros, sync libraries, even foreign distributors. Flagged misrepresented collaborations. Names that appeared beside mine without permission. The system isn't fast, but when it moves, it's thorough. Payments freeze. Reputations fracture. Then I went public. Not with bitterness, but truth. I wrote a post on my professional site. No accusations. No names. Just a story about being erased. About watching someone else use your voice while you're still alive to hear it. It spread. Fans reached out. Industry friends messaged privately, some apologizing, others sharing their own Chase stories. I didn't need to name him. They knew. And then, the final strike. I scheduled a showcase, small venue, low lights, one mic, one stool. A set list of songs I hadn't played in years. I invited everyone. Even Mara. She didn't come, but I left a comp ticket for her anyway. And I made sure the last song, a new one, was filmed. One verse stood out. You stole my house, my name, my echo / but not the silence after the storm. The next morning, Chase's studio website was offline. By the end of the week, Mara's LLCs were marked inactive. Not because I screamed, because I showed them exactly what they were. And made sure the world saw it, too. 2 weeks later, Chase was arrested in Charlotte on wire fraud and misrepresentation charges. Not for what he did to me, not directly, but because of what my report helped uncover. A paper trail through 3 states for artists and nearly $300,000 in siphoned royalties. Mara wasn't charged. Not yet. But she was listed in the discovery documents. Her name attached to forged signatures, accounts registered under aliases, email threads that read like a heist in slow motion. She denied everything, of course. Claimed ignorance. Said she was just helping with branding. But the emails told a different story, one where she played the assistant, the partner, and sometimes the architect. Aaron called me the day the deposition ended. She didn't cry, he said. But she looked like someone finally told her gravity was real. Chase took a plea deal. Named names. Cut his losses to try to save his skin. Mara offered a settlement through her lawyer. House back in my name. No claim to spousal support. Full rights to all my music restored. In return, no further legal pursuit. I read through it slowly. Then signed. Not because I was letting her off the hook, but because it meant I'd finally closed the book. On her, on the lies, on the version of myself that kept trying to understand why she did it. Some answers aren't worth chasing. The night the court order came through, I walked into my studio, turned the lights low, and sat with my guitar in my lap. Didn't play, just listened. The quiet felt different now. Not lonely. Clean. I didn't rebuild my life. That's too clean a word. I just started walking forward. The house felt like a stranger when I moved back in. Every doorknob familiar, every room colder than I remembered. She'd taken the throw pillows, the records, even the tea kettle. Left the walls in silence. Fine. I painted over both. I started with the studio. Took down the old photos. Rehung new ones. Polaroids from open mics. Flyers from the days before I was anyone. I needed to remember the man I was before her. I played smaller gigs for a while. Coffee shops. Songwriter circles. Places where no one asked questions about Chase or Mara or the headlines that circled for a few days and then moved on like weather. One night in Asheville, I played a song I'd never recorded, one of the ones I wrote at the lake. A woman came up after, maybe mid-30s, quiet voice. That line, the one about love being a bruise you press to remember the pain, that hit me hard. I just nodded. Yeah, me too. She didn't ask for a photo, didn't flirt, just said thank you. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not numb, either. Just still. Mara texted once, months after it all settled. Just 3 words. I'm sorry. Truly. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. Not out of spite. Because I didn't need anything from her anymore. That was the real freedom. Not getting justice. Not proving them wrong. It was waking up in the house she tried to take. Drinking coffee from a chipped mug I'd had since 2002. Watching light move across the hardwood floors, and knowing I'd survived. I didn't need closure. I just needed a quiet morning that didn't hurt. And this was one of them.